Welcome to the PHYA Academy video newsletter. This is Heroism 1. Okay, when talking about ideas of heroism, we first have to get a grasp and a handle on what it means to be heroic. And in order to do that, we have to figure out, well, what does it mean to be a hero? So we turn to the dictionary just to get an objective sense of what we mean when we say hero and heroic. And a hero is generally a mythological or a legendary figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability. So there's this clear link to mythology, divinity, and transcendence. An illustrious warrior. Okay, so taking it sort of into the realm of mortality, heroism is linked to bravery and courage when it comes to facing a physical threat. And certainly warriors, soldiers face that threat in battle. But we can also abstract that a little bit more. A person admired for achievements and noble qualities. So it doesn't necessarily have to be facing an immediate physical threat and conquering it, but simply anybody who achieves and exudes qualities that others want to aspire towards, or virtues that we deem positive and are worthy of emulation. And then finally, we can really get all the way down to the final level of abstraction, one who shows great courage, right? And so we've gone from the specific to the particular down to the general in thinking about a hero. And a hero is simply somebody who shows great courage. And in ancient Greek mythology, we're talking about the roots of athleticism and how we can understand that ancient wisdom to better our lives today. In my self-published book, The Athletic Hero, I locate sort of the genesis of the idea of the athlete as a heroic model, right? As a class of people who are admired for their achievements and noble qualities, as a class of people who show great courage. And when I say class of people, I simply just mean athletes as a group, as like an occupation, in a sense. And what I write in my book is that the hero upon which all athletes strive towards is the only transcendental individual in Greek mythology. So what I mean by that is there's only one legend in all of Greek mythology who started as a mortal and moved to the realm of the divine, right? They transcended their mortality, and that this is the hero that all athletes are modeled after. And so when we understand athletes as heroes, what we're really doing is emulating a particular model based on one specific example from the ancient Greek world. And that example is Hercules or Hercules. He is the athletic hero. He is the model from which the archetype of the athlete as this role model, as this positive character type, as this generator of virtue, it all comes back to this mythological example. Because what separates Hercules from a lot of legends and a lot of mythologies is his physicality, specifically his physicality in service of his growth in moral strength and character. And in another PHYA Academy newsletter, Accountability 1, we talk about Heracles' choice between vice and virtue, that he was given a choice, whether to go down the path of struggle and ultimately the path which leads to greatness and his destiny, or the easy road, right? The vicious road, the road of pleasure and the road of hedonism. And if you're familiar at all with the story of Heracles or Hercules, you know that he has to perform 12 labors in order to claim his birthright. And all of these labors are extraordinarily physical and dangerous. He uses his physicality, his strength, but also his intellect and his wit in order to defeat monsters, tyrants, giants, and essentially freeing the Greek people from some tyranny that was accompanying them in the form of these monsters, dragons. In the case of the picture here, Hercules is famous for wearing around a lion skin because one of his first labors was to kill the Nemean lion with his bare hands. The Nemean lion was one of these mythical giants, one of these mythical beasts. And so Hercules succeeded and skinned the lion and then wore it around as if to, again, proclaim a little bit of an intimidation factor as he was moving around the ancient Mediterranean world performing these 12 labors. And there's a lot of interesting links between Heracles and the notion of athleticism in his story, but the mythology in ancient Greece gives us a very strong link. He is one of the mythological founders of the Olympic Games. Now, there are a bunch of legends and a bunch of myths about the founding of the Olympic Games. One of the most prominent ones is the Heraclean myth, that he is the one who actually founded them. And his purpose for founding them was to bring peace to the land and to quell internal divisions within the ancient Greeks. And if you sort of are interested in the specifics of that process, I detail this in my book, The Athletic Hero, getting into the realm of etymology, getting into the realm of philosophy and understanding how this actually evolved in a historical sense as well. But when we're talking about athletes as role models, athletes as heroes, athletes as people we aspire towards, it's through Heracles' physicality, right? Bringing peace to the land, subduing monsters and tyrants, founding athletic competition as a peace offering, and then allowing his people to follow in his ways. And the ancient Olympics ran from 776 BC, that's the mythological date, but also the historical date, all the way until 394 AD. So they had a 1,000-year continuous tradition. So it seems as if the ancient Greeks really did follow and believe the teachings of Heracles. And it's through that Olympic connection relating to heroism and peace that we get some contemporary understanding of athletic heroism in action. And there may be no greater example of an athletic hero from the 20th century than Jesse Owens. Now, for those who don't know Jesse Owens, he was the American track athlete who busted everybody's scientific beliefs at the 1936 Berlin Olympics, which were performed in front of the National Socialist leader Adolf Hitler. And what I mean by smashed the scientific consensus was this is the era of eugenics. This was the era of white supremacy, legitimated, being taught in universities throughout the Western world and even being implemented into the governmental policies of places like National Socialist Germany. So here we have a black man in the face of all of this evidence and science that he is inferior, that he cannot possibly win. What does he go and do? He's the first athlete to ever win 4 gold medals at one Olympic Games. That is something that no ancient athlete was able to do. And he was such a hero of the games for doing this. Not only just the actual physical heroism of winning 4 gold medals in track and field, but in the fashion that he did it. He was not a braggart. He didn't make a big scene. He let his actions do the talking. And this garnered almost near universal respect. Adolf Hitler had hired a very famous cinematographer, Leni Riefenstahl. She produced all of his great propaganda films, the biggest one being Triumph of the Will. That one covered his 1935 Nuremberg rallies, for example. You've probably seen footage of them. If you just think of the charismatic Hitler banging and being all wild in his speeches, and there's thousands and thousands of people he's talking to. It's likely you're remembering scenes from Triumph of the Will. Well, he hired her to document the Berlin Olympics, and that film is called Olympia, and it's actually one of the greatest sports films in terms of filming techniques that was ever done. And a lot of live sport broadcasts actually use the exact same filming techniques that Leni Riefenstahl pioneered. But who do you think the hero of Leni Riefenstahl's Olympia film was, right? At the beginning, at the outset, Hitler wanted it to be the Aryans, and probably he was going to be the hero of the film. But if you watch it, it's Jesse Owens. She focuses on Jesse Owens. She presents him in an extraordinarily positive light. His example was so strong that he was able to penetrate this notion of Aryan supremacy because his example was just so pure. And that's what makes him a hero. It's not the fact that he was able to run faster than everyone else, but that he exuded the right character, he exuded the right type of strength and sacrifice, and was willing to face pressure that not a lot of people would, and he achieved in the face of all of those obstacles. And this, again, highlights this ideal that the ancient Greeks believed in when it came to the athletes and what they represented. Because in competition, the athlete is praised for their sacrifice in order to achieve their hard work, their dedication, and in some sense, going back to that initial definition of heroism, willing to risk bodily harm, and in the case of these ancient Greek athletes, sometimes death. Death was not uncommon in the heavy combat sports like boxing, wrestling, or the pankration. Pankration is basically like mixed martial arts. And so the athletes in the ancient Greek world needed a model themselves, right? They needed something to aspire to. They needed an archetype to base their mode of existence, their mode of being around. And they were inspired by the mythological heroes like Hercules. Somebody like Chianis of Sparta, for example, who was the first 3-time sprint champion and held the Olympic long jumping record until the modern era. His jump of 7 meters 5 centimeters in 656 BC would have gotten him the gold at the very first modern Olympics in 1896 in Athens. So these athletes of the past used these mythological examples as their inspiration to become legends in their own time. And legendary status, heroism, these were the prizes they sought. When you won at the Olympics, like Chianis did, you did not receive riches and fame from the Olympic judges. All you received was a laurel wreath. And this was to symbolize connection to Hercules, specifically that you win in order to be glorified, you win in order to be honored, you win in order to be emulated. You don't win in order to receive riches and to receive status. Although the athletes did receive riches and status, we might think about the ways in which big money has maybe sullied the romance of professional sport in the modern age. This happened to the ancient Greeks as well, so much so that by the time of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, they were lambasting the athletes for having forgotten their amateur roots, their heroic roots, and for lusting after status, victory, and external rewards. And so what we need to remember is that sport as an activity in its nature is an heroic training ground. That it actually is supposed to train us to become heroes ourselves. That through our bodies we can understand how to become more intelligent and more morally strong and secure. So when it comes to reflecting and applying, what does this mean for us today? How can we take the lessons of ancient heroism through Hercules and even historical examples like Jesse Owens to implement some of these ideas into our own lives to make them better? Well, I mentioned that the ancient athletes weren't after prizes. They wanted something better. They wanted the attainment of the most excellent virtue because this is what would allow them to receive glory and honor. This is exactly what Jesse Owens exemplified at those 1936 games. It wasn't the fact that his legs moved faster than everyone else. It was the fact that his victories exemplified his true character, and his true character was aiming at that most excellent virtue. And for the ancient Greeks, the most excellent virtue was the combination of body and mind together, aiming at a moral outcome. And so the lesson for us, and what does it mean, is that we gain strength when we combine our body, mind, and soul. We don't just gain strength in one area. We gain strength in all the areas. So when we are exercising our bodies, we're actually improving our minds. There's a lot of science to suggest that exercise increases your cognitive abilities. But we're also fortifying our moral characters. We are sacrificing, we're struggling, we are moving towards a goal, right? We are achieving something. And that this gives us a kind of a moral clarity and a moral strength. And it's really as simple as when you do something difficult in one domain, you have knowledge that you may be able to transfer in another domain. And so why should we encourage this notion of personal heroism? Well, because it gives us courage to face the difficult challenges in life and to overcome them. And this is why athletes are so valuable in educating us and informing us about heroism. That's why we praise athletes. That's why we celebrate them in the first place, is because we believe that through their example, their achievement, their sacrifice, their dedication, that it leads them to better character. Now, it's not a necessary link, and it is always incumbent upon the person, whoever it is, to act upon your own potential. And there are no guarantees that if you do X activity, you'll become Y better person. But that's also to say that there are patterns of behavior, that there are structures, and that there are certain ideas that seem to produce more consistent results. So if we understand the true nature of what we're trying to accomplish when we work our bodies out, when we study intellectually, when we apply critical thinking, or when we stand on principle when it's easier to fold and be expedient. This is the type of heroism that athletics should inspire within us, and if we practice, can actually build within ourselves. All right, great conversation. Look forward to the next one. See you then.